The courtroom fell into a silence, so heavy it felt like the air itself had stopped breathing. "Say it again," the judge demanded, his voice tight with disbelief. The young man standing at the witness stand trembled. His expensive suit, his polished shoes, his confident posture, all of it had crumbled in a matter of seconds. Sweat rolled down his forehead as every eye in the room fixed on him. I didn't know," he stammered. "I swear I didn't know she was my mother." A sharp gasp rippled through the courtroom. On the other side of the room, an older woman sat quietly, her thin frame wrapped in a faded dress that had clearly seen better days. Her hands were rough, her face lined with years of struggle, but her eyes were calm. Too calm. Because moments ago, that same young man had laughed at her, mocked her, called her a burden to society. And now, standing before the entire court, he had just realized the truth. The woman he humiliated in front of everyone was the same mother who sacrificed everything to make him who he was. A man he had abandoned. A mother he had forgotten. And now, the entire truth was unraveling. The judge leaned forward slowly. "You expect this court to believe that you built a successful life without ever questioning where you came from." The young man's voice cracked. "I was told she died. I was told she left me." The woman finally spoke, her voice soft but piercing. "No," she said. "You were told what they wanted you to believe." The courtroom shifted uneasily. Because this wasn't just a case anymore. This was a story. A story of sacrifice. Of betrayal. Of a mother who gave everything, only to be erased. And of a son who mocked the very pain that built his future. The judge sat back, his expression unreadable. "Then we will hear everything," he said firmly, "from the beginning." The woman closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering years of buried pain into a single breath. When she opened them again, her gaze locked onto the young man, not with anger, but with something far more powerful. Truth. And just before she spoke, the young man whispered under his breath, barely audible. "What have I done?" But it was too late. Because the story was about to begin. And once the truth came out, nothing would ever be the same again. The courtroom leaned in. The past was no longer buried. And the price for mocking a mother's sacrifice was about to be revealed. What no one knew yet was that this story did not begin in a courtroom. It began years ago. On a dusty road, under a burning sun. With a mother who had nothing, but was willing to give everything. And a decision she made that would change both their lives forever. The woman took a deep breath and began. But the first words she spoke would leave everyone in that courtroom stunned years earlier, long before the courtroom, before the polished suits and painful accusations. There was a small, struggling neighborhood on the edge of a quiet town. The roads were uneven, the houses patched together with hope and desperation. And in one of those tiny homes lived a young woman named Naomi Carter. Naomi was only 23, but life had already carved hardship into her bones. Her dark skin glowed under the harsh sun, her natural hair always wrapped neatly in a faded scarf. She worked tirelessly, cleaning homes, washing clothes, selling food by the roadside, anything to survive. But survival was not her greatest burden. It was her son, little Jaden Carter. A boy no older than 5, with bright eyes full of curiosity and innocence. He followed Naomi everywhere, holding onto her dress as though she was his entire world. Because she was. "Mama," Jaden would say every morning, tugging at her hand. "One day I'll build you a big house, a very big one." Naomi would smile, even when her stomach was empty. "I believe you," she would reply, brushing his hair gently. "But for now, you must go to school and learn." School. That word carried both hope and pain. Because Naomi could barely afford it. There were days she skipped meals just to pay his fees. Days she walked miles under the burning sun to save transport money. Nights she cried quietly so Jaden wouldn't hear. But no matter how hard it got, she never stopped. Because to her, Jaden wasn't just her son. He was her future, her purpose, her sacrifice. But not everyone saw it that way. "You're wasting your time," her neighbor, Mrs. Douglas, would scoff one afternoon. "Look at you, suffering like this for a child. What if he grows up and forgets you?" Naomi shook her head firmly. "He won't." Mrs. Douglas laughed bitterly. "They always do." Naomi said nothing, because deep down, she refused to believe it. Every evening, after long hours of work, Naomi would sit with Jaden under a dim lantern, teaching him how to read. "Sound it out," she encouraged. "B-O-OK, book," Jaden shouted excitedly. Naomi clapped softly, her face lighting up with pride. "You see, you're going to be great." And in those small moments, all her suffering felt worth it. But life had other plans. One evening, as Naomi returned home from work, she found something that made her heart drop. A letter, folded carefully, placed at the doorstep. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was from the school. Her chest tightened as her eyes scanned the words. "Due to unpaid fees, Jaden Carter will no longer be allowed to attend." The rest blurred. Naomi sank to the ground, her body shaking. She had tried. She had given everything. And still, it wasn't enough. Inside the house, Jaden ran out excitedly. "Mama, did you bring bread?" Naomi quickly wiped her tears and forced a smile. "Yes," she said softly, handing him the small loaf she could barely afford. As he ate happily, unaware of the storm brewing, Naomi turned away, her heart breaking silently. That night, she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. There had to be a way. There had to be something she could do. And then, an idea came. A dangerous one. The kind of decision that could change everything. The next morning, Naomi woke up with a determination that frightened even her. She dressed Jaden carefully, kissed his forehead, and held him a little longer than usual. "Mama has to go somewhere today," she said gently. Jaden smiled. "Will you come back?" Naomi hesitated for just a second. Then she forced a nod. "Always." But even as she said it, something in her eyes told a different story. Because where Naomi was going was not a place people return from unchanged. And the choice she was about to make would shape Jaden's entire life, even if it meant losing him forever. Before we continue, take a moment. Where are you watching this story from? Drop your location in the comments. And tell me this. If you were in Naomi's position, what would you have done? Would you sacrifice everything for your child, even if it meant they might never know the truth? If this story is already touching your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because what Naomi is about to do next will shock you. The sun had barely risen when Naomi stepped onto the long, dusty road that led out of her neighborhood. Each step felt heavier than the last. Not because of the distance, but because of the decision she had already made in her heart. She clutched the small bag in her hand tightly. Inside it were the only things she owned of value: her late mother's necklace, a pair of earrings, and a neatly folded document. Jaden's birth certificate. She had not told anyone where she was going. Not even Mrs. Douglas. Because if she did, they would try to stop her. And Naomi knew she couldn't afford to be stopped. After hours of walking, she finally arrived at a part of town she had only heard about but never stepped into. Everything looked different. Clean streets, tall gates, big houses with shining cars parked outside. This was where the wealthy lived, where people like Naomi were invisible. She hesitated for a moment at the entrance of one of the largest estates. A tall gate stood before her, guarded by a uniformed security man who looked her up and down with clear judgment. "Yes," he asked coldly. Naomi swallowed hard. I came to see Mr. Harrison Cole." The guard frowned. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's important, please." The man sighed, clearly irritated, but something in Naomi's trembling voice made him pause. After a brief call inside, the gate slowly opened. "Go in," he said, "but be quick." Naomi nodded gratefully and stepped inside, her heart pounding louder with every step. The house was massive, bigger than anything she had ever seen. And inside it lived a man known for one thing: power. Harrison Cole. A businessman whose name carried weight everywhere. Wealthy, respected, feared. And childless. Naomi had heard the whispers. That he and his wife had been trying for years. That they wanted a child, but had none. And that was why she was here. She was led into a large living room where everything sparkled with perfection. She felt out of place immediately. Then he walked in. Tall, calm, sharp eyes that missed nothing. Harrison Cole. He looked at her once and already seemed uninterested. "You have 5 minutes," he said. Naomi's throat tightened. 5 minutes to decide her child's future. "My name is Naomi Carter," she began softly. "I have a son." He said nothing. I can't take care of him anymore," she continued, her voice shaking. "But he's smart, he's kind, he deserves a better life." Harrison's expression didn't change. "And you think I'm the solution?" he asked. Naomi nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes. "I don't want money," she added quickly. "I don't want anything, I just want him to have a chance." Silence filled the room. Harrison studied her carefully now. Not with pity, but with calculation. "You're asking me to take your child," he said, just like that. Naomi clenched her fists. "This isn't easy," she whispered. "He's my everything." "Then why give him away?" That question cut deep. Naomi's voice broke, "Because loving him is not enough anymore." For the first time, Harrison's expression shifted slightly. Just slightly. He turned away, walking toward the window. "And what happens when you change your mind?" he asked. "When you come back years later, demanding to see him?" The next morning came too quickly. Naomi barely slept. Her eyes were swollen, her body weak, but her mind was made up. Jaden sat on the small wooden stool, swinging his legs happily as Naomi dressed him in his cleanest clothes, a neatly pressed shirt and trousers she had saved for special occasions. "Mama, where are we going?" he asked with a bright smile. Naomi forced a gentle smile back. "Somewhere nice." "Will there be food?" he asked innocently. Her heart clenched. "Yes," she whispered, "more than enough." Jaden grinned. "Then I like it already." Naomi turned away quickly, so he wouldn't see the tears forming in her eyes. She packed his small bag, just a few clothes, his favorite toy car, and the only photo they had together. She stared at that photo for a long moment before placing it inside. Then she reached for something else. A small piece of paper. Her hands trembled as she wrote, "My son, if you ever find this, know that I loved you more than anything in this world. Everything I did for you." She folded it carefully and slipped it into the inner lining of his bag, hidden where only fate could reveal it. "Mama," Jaden called, "let's go." Naomi took a deep breath. This was it. They stepped out into the morning sun, walking side by side. Jaden held her hand tightly, talking endlessly about dreams, toys, and the big house he imagined they were going to. Naomi listened, memorized every word. Because she knew this would be the last time. When they arrived at Harrison Cole's estate, the gates opened immediately this time. Everything felt quieter, heavier. A maid welcomed them in and led them to the same room. Harrison was already waiting. But this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a woman, elegant, composed, with a soft but observant gaze. His wife, Evelyn Cole. Her eyes immediately fell on Jaden, and something in her expression changed. Warmth, hope, a kind of silent longing. "Is this him?" she asked softly. Naomi nodded, unable to speak. Jaden looked around in awe. Mama, this place is big. Evelyn smiled gently and knelt down to his level. Hello, sweetheart, what's your name? Jaden, he said proudly. Well, Jaden, she said, brushing his hair lightly, would you like to see your new room? Naomi's heart skipped. New room. The words echoed painfully. Jaden looked at Naomi for permission. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. Go on. He ran off happily with Evelyn, laughing as they disappeared down the hallway. And just like that, the room felt empty. Naomi stood frozen. Harrison stepped forward. You should leave before he comes back. Her chest tightened. So soon, she whispered. He said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Naomi took a slow step toward the hallway where Jaden had disappeared. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run after him, to hold him, to take him back, to forget everything. But she didn't, because she had already made her choice. Instead, she turned away. Each step toward the door felt like a piece of her soul was being torn apart. Her hand reached the handle. And then, Mama. The voice hit her like a storm. Naomi froze. Jaden came running back, his little face glowing with excitement. You didn't see my room yet, he said, grabbing her hand. Naomi dropped to her knees and pulled him into a tight embrace. Too tight, as if she could hold onto him forever. You're so strong, my boy, she whispered into his hair, her voice breaking. So strong. Jaden laughed. Of course, I told you I'll build you a big house one day. Naomi closed her eyes tightly, tears slipping down her face. Yes, she whispered, you will. She pulled away slowly, holding his face in her hands. Be good, she said. Always listen, always be kind. Jaden frowned slightly. Why are you talking like that? Naomi forced a smile. Because I'm proud of you. Before he could ask more, Evelyn gently stepped in. Jaden, come, she said softly. Let's finish what we started. Jaden hesitated, looking back at Naomi. Mama, you're coming, right? The question shattered her completely. But she smiled anyway. I'll come later. He nodded, satisfied, and followed Evelyn again. This time, he didn't come back. Naomi stood there, staring at the empty hallway. Waiting. Hopping. Praying. But no footsteps returned. Harrison's voice broke the silence. It's done. Naomi didn't respond. She couldn't. Because in that moment, she felt something inside her die. She turned slowly and walked out of the house. The gates closed behind her with a heavy finality. And just like that, she was gone. Erased. Forgotten. Or so it seemed. Because across the street, hidden behind a parked car, a man lowered his phone slowly. He had recorded everything. Every word. Every tear. And a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. This, he muttered, is going to be worth a lot. Before we continue, take a moment to reflect. What would you have done if you were Naomi? Could you walk away from your child for their future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story is pulling at your heart already, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Because what happens next will change everything. The video spread faster than anyone expected. At first, it was just a whisper, shared quietly between a few people who found it interesting. A poor woman giving up her child to a wealthy family. Tears, promises, sacrifice. But whispers don't stay quiet for long. Within days, the video was everywhere. Phones buzzed, screens lit up, people watched, replayed, and shared. Some called Naomi brave. Others called her foolish. But most people, they judged. Who gives away their own child like that? She must have wanted money. No real mother would do this. No one knew the full story. No one cared to. And Naomi. She had no idea. She had returned to her small home that day, and life had continued, if it could even be called that. The house felt empty. Too quiet. The small wooden stool Jaden used to sit on remained untouched. His toy car was gone. His voice gone. Naomi tried to stay strong. She woke up every morning, went to work, came back and sat in silence. But the nights were the hardest. Because that was when the memories came. "Mama, I'll build you a big house." She would hold her chest tightly, trying to breathe through the pain. But nothing could prepare her for what came next. One afternoon, as she returned from work, she noticed something strange. People were staring, whispering, pointing at her. She slowed her steps, confusion creeping in. Then someone shouted, "Look, that's her." Naomi froze. Another voice followed, louder this time. "The woman from the video." Her heart skipped. "What video?" she whispered to herself. Before she could understand, a group of people surrounded her. Phones were raised in her face. Cameras recording. "Why did you sell your child?" someone demanded. Naomi's eyes widened. "I didn't sell." "Don't lie," another voice snapped. "We saw everything." Her breath became uneven. I don't understand." But they didn't care. To them, she was already guilty. The video had decided her story. "You abandoned him. You're heartless. You don't deserve to be called a mother." Each word hit her like a blow. Naomi stumbled backward, her vision blurring with tears. "I did it for him," she tried to explain. "Please, you don't know." But her voice was drowned out. Because the louder the truth tried to speak, the louder the lies became. By evening, the entire neighborhood knew. The same people who once pitied her now despised her. Mrs. Douglas stood at her doorway, shaking her head. "I warned you," she said coldly. "They always forget, but you didn't even give him the chance." Naomi's lips trembled. "That's not what happened." But the door slammed shut before she could finish. And just like that, she was alone. Again. But this time, it was worse. Because now, she wasn't just invisible. She was hated. Days passed, but things only got worse. People refused to greet her. Some avoided her completely. Others insulted her openly. Work became difficult. Employers didn't want someone with that kind of reputation. And slowly, Naomi began to lose everything. But across town, in a world far away from struggle and judgment, Jaden's life had changed completely. His new home was everything Naomi had hoped for. A big room, clean clothes, good food, education. He was enrolled in one of the best schools. Teachers praised him. Students admired him. And slowly, he began to forget. Not everything, but enough. "Your parents must be proud," one of his classmates said one day. Jaden smiled. "They are." And in that moment, something shifted. Because the word parents no longer meant the same thing. Years passed. Jaden grew. Stronger, smarter, more confident. The boy who once dreamed under a dim lantern was now living in a world of endless light. But with each passing year, the memory of Naomi faded. Her face, her voice, her sacrifices, all slipping away like a distant dream. Until one day, they were gone completely. And then came the moment that would change everything. At a prestigious event, filled with powerful people, Jaden, now a young man, stood confidently among them. Well-dressed, well-spoken, admired. Harrison Cole stood beside him proudly. "This is my son," he announced. The room applauded. Jaden smiled. Everything he had, everything he had become, was because of this life. This new life. And then, a commotion at the entrance. The doors opened. Security guards struggled with someone. "Let me in," a weak but desperate voice cried out. Jaden turned slightly, annoyed at the disruption. "Throw her out," someone muttered. And then he saw her. An older woman. Thin. Worn. Dressed in faded clothes. Her hair covered with a scarf. Her eyes filled with desperation. For a brief moment, something flickered in his memory. But it disappeared just as quickly. Because the people around him were already laughing. "Who let her in here? She doesn't belong here." Jaden shook his head slightly, his expression hardening. "People like this," he said calmly, "are exactly why places like this need better security." The room murmured in agreement. And the woman stopped struggling. Because those words came from the one person she never expected. Her son. But Jaden didn't know. And as the guards dragged her away, he looked away too. Without a second thought. Without recognition. Without care. But what he didn't know was that someone in that room had recognized her. And more importantly, recognized the truth. And this time, the truth was not going to stay hidden. The laughter in the room faded slowly, but the damage had already been done. Outside, under the dim glow of the streetlights, Naomi sat on the cold ground. Her body trembled, not from the night air, but from something far deeper. Pain. Not the kind that fades with time. The kind that settles into your bones and stays there. She hadn't planned to come. For years, she stayed away, keeping the promise she made. She never tried to see him, never asked about him, never interfered. But that day, she heard his name. Jaden Cole. On the radio. They spoke about his achievements, his brilliance, his success. And something inside her stirred. Not pride alone, but longing. Just once, she wanted to see him. From a distance. Just to know he was okay. That her sacrifice meant something. So she came. She stood outside the grand building for a long time, gathering courage. And when she finally stepped inside, she never imagined it would end like this. Her son. Her own son. Looking at her with nothing but disgust. Calling her people like this. Naomi let out a broken laugh that quickly turned into silent tears. "I kept my promise," she whispered to herself. "I stayed away, I gave him everything." Her voice cracked. "And still, he doesn't know me." Footsteps approached. Naomi quickly wiped her face, trying to compose herself. A man stepped into the light. Mid-40s, well-dressed, calm but observant eyes. It was Daniel Reed. A journalist. He had been in the room. And unlike the others, he didn't laugh. "I saw what happened in there," he said gently. Naomi said nothing. "There's something I need to ask you," Daniel continued. "That video, the one that went viral years ago, was that you?" Naomi stiffened. So that was it. Even here. It had followed her. She lowered her head slowly. "Yes." Daniel studied her carefully. "And the boy in that video, Jaden." She closed her eyes. "Is my son." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Daniel took a deep breath. "Then why didn't you say anything in there?" he asked. "Why let them treat you like that?" Naomi looked up at him, her eyes filled with quiet strength despite the pain. "Because I gave my word," she said. "I chose his future over my presence. If I speak now, I take that choice back." Daniel frowned. "But he humiliated you." Naomi nodded slowly. "Yes. And you're just going to accept that." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the building, as if she could still see him inside. "I didn't sacrifice for recognition," she said softly. "I did it for him to have a life I couldn't give." Daniel's expression shifted. This wasn't weakness. This was something else. Something rare. "But he deserves to know," Daniel said firmly. He deserves to know the truth. Naomi shook her head. Maybe, she admitted, but not from me. Then from who? She hesitated. And for the first time, there was uncertainty in her eyes. Because deep down, she didn't know. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He opened something. The video. The one that started everything. This video doesn't tell your full story, he said. It shows your sacrifice, but not your pain, not your truth. Naomi stared at the screen, her chest tightening. I can tell it, Daniel continued. The real story, the truth behind everything. Naomi's heart skipped. No, she said quickly. That will only make things worse. For who? Daniel asked. She hesitated again. For him, she whispered. Daniel stepped closer. Or are you protecting him from something else? He asked quietly. Naomi's eyes flickered. Because there was something else. Something she had buried deep for years. And before she could stop herself, she said it. There was a condition. Daniel's brows furrowed. What kind of condition? Naomi's voice dropped. If I ever came back, if I ever tried to reveal the truth. She swallowed hard. I would lose everything, even the little I have left. Daniel's expression hardened. Who gave you that condition? He asked. Naomi didn't answer. But she didn't need to. Because there was only one person who could. Harrison Cole. Inside the building, at that same moment, Harrison stood near the window, watching the street below. He had seen everything. Naomi. Daniel. The conversation. His jaw tightened. She should have stayed away, he muttered. Behind him, Evelyn stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. She's his mother. Harrison didn't turn. She made her choice. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. And now it's time you face yours. He finally turned, his expression dark. What does that mean? Evelyn held his gaze. It means the truth doesn't stay hidden forever. Outside, Daniel looked back at Naomi. This story isn't over, he said. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. I know. But what neither of them realized was that someone else had been listening. Hidden in the shadows. Recording every word. And this time, the truth was about to explode in a way no one could control. Before we continue, think about this carefully. If you were Jaden, would you want to know the truth, even if it shattered everything you believed? Or would you rather live in a comfortable lie? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story is keeping you on edge, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others. Because what happens next will shake everything to its core. The next morning, the truth began to move. Not quietly, not slowly, but like a storm that had been waiting for years to break free. Daniel Reed didn't sleep that night. He sat at his desk, replaying everything Naomi had said, her voice, her pain, her silence. It didn't match the story the world believed. And that meant only one thing. The world had been lied to. By sunrise, Daniel had already made calls, pulled records, and dug into the past. Adoption papers, legal agreements, financial records. And what he found made his hands go cold. There were documents. Signed. Stamped. Official. But buried deep within them was something disturbing. A clause. A hidden condition that was never meant to be seen. If Naomi Carter ever attempted to reveal her identity or reconnect with the child, she would face legal consequences. Heavy ones. Everything she owned could be taken. Her name could be dragged through the courts. Silenced. Controlled. Daniel leaned back in his chair slowly. This wasn't just adoption, he muttered. This was ownership. Meanwhile, across town, Naomi woke up to something she hadn't felt in a long time. Fear. There was a strange tension in the air, like something was about to happen. And then, A knock on her door. Sharp. Urgent. Naomi hesitated before opening it. Two men stood outside. Well-dressed. Serious. Naomi Carter, one of them asked. Her heart skipped. Yes. You've been served. He handed her a thick envelope. Her hands trembled as she took it. What is this? She asked softly. But deep down, she already knew. The men didn't answer. They turned and walked away without another word. Naomi closed the door slowly. The room suddenly felt too small. Too heavy. She opened the envelope, and as her eyes scanned the words, her knees gave out. She collapsed to the floor. Legal notice. Violation of agreement. Attempt to breach contract. Her breath became uneven. No, I did, she whispered. I didn't say anything. But the paper didn't care about truth. Only power. And someone had decided. She had crossed a line. Across town, Harrison Cole stood in his office, calm and composed. You've handled it, he asked without looking up. Yes, sir, one of his assistants replied. She's been notified, that should keep her quiet. Harrison nodded. Good. He walked to the window, looking out over the city. This should have ended years ago. But behind him, Evelyn stood silently, watching him. And this time, she didn't look calm. You're punishing her, she said. Harrison didn't turn. I'm protecting what matters. Evelyn's voice sharpened. At what cost? Still, he didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew. Meanwhile, Jaden sat in his office, reviewing files, preparing for a major presentation. His life was moving forward, as it always had. Perfect. Controlled. Predictable. Until his phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. He frowned slightly and opened it. It was a video. He almost ignored it. Almost. But something made him press play. And the moment it started, everything stopped. It was the old video. The one of Naomi. But this version was different. It had been edited. Expanded. Voices added. Clips he had never seen before. Her tears. Her words. Her sacrifice. And then, a second video followed. New. Clear. Recent. Naomi's voice again. He's my son. Jaden's heart slammed against his chest. No, he whispered. His hands trembled as he replayed it. Again. And again. And again. The room felt like it was closing in on him. That woman. The one from last night. The one he mocked. His breathing became uneven. No, that's not possible. But deep down, something inside him already knew. The flicker he felt when he saw her. The strange pull. The familiarity he couldn't explain. It all came rushing back. And suddenly, his past wasn't empty anymore. It was hidden. Lies. Secrets. Pieces missing. Jaden stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back. He grabbed his keys and rushed out. Because there was only one place he needed to go. One person who had answers. And this time, he wasn't going to be ignored. Back at the mansion, Harrison had just sat down when the doors burst open. Jaden stormed in, his face pale, his eyes filled with something Harrison had never seen before. Not confidence. Not control. But anger. What is this? Jaden demanded, holding up his phone. Harrison glanced at the screen. And for the first time in years, he looked unsettled. You need to explain, Jaden said, his voice shaking. Right now. Evelyn stepped forward slowly. Because she knew. This moment had been coming. For years. Harrison took a deep breath. But before he could speak, Jaden's voice broke. Is she my mother? Silence filled the room. Heavy, unavoidable. And for the first time, Harrison didn't have control of the story anymore. Because the truth had finally caught up. And this time, it wasn't going away. The silence in the room felt like glass about to shatter. The city was unusually quiet that night. But inside the Cole mansion, silence felt like a warning. Harrison stood in his office, staring at the glass wall overlooking the city lights. Everything he had built, everything he had protected, now felt fragile. Evelyn entered quietly. You can still fix this, she said. Harrison didn't turn. There's nothing to fix. Evelyn stepped closer. You turned a mother into a secret and a son into a lie. His jaw tightened. I gave him a life he never would have had. Evelyn's voice sharpened, at the cost of his truth. That word lingered in the air. Truth. Harrison finally turned. Truth destroys more than lies ever do. Evelyn shook her head. No, lies just delay the damage. A long silence followed. Then, the front doors burst open. Jaden walked in. But this time, he wasn't confused. He wasn't angry. He was calm. Too calm. Behind him stood Daniel Reed, holding a folder. And Naomi followed slowly behind them. Harrison's eyes narrowed. This doesn't concern you, he said to Daniel. Daniel stepped forward. It concerns everyone, he replied. He opened the folder and placed it on the table. Documents, proof, signed agreements, audio recordings, and one final piece. A recorded statement from Naomi. Harrison's expression shifted slightly. Evelyn stepped closer to the table, reading quickly. This is illegal, she whispered. Daniel looked at Harrison. No, he said calmly. What you did was. Jaden stood still, watching his father carefully. Then he spoke. You told me she abandoned me, he said quietly. You let me believe I was unwanted. Harrison's voice hardened. I protected you. No, Jaden replied. You protected yourself. That statement landed hard. Naomi stepped forward for the first time. Her voice was soft. I never stopped loving him, she said. Jaden looked at her, and something in his expression finally broke open fully. Not anger, not confusion, but grief. I spent years thinking I was chosen, he said. Now I realize I was taken. Silence. Heavy. Then Evelyn spoke again, her voice firm. This ends tonight. Harrison turned sharply. You don't control this family. Evelyn met his gaze. No, she said, but I won't watch it destroy itself anymore. She turned to Jaden. You deserve the truth, all of it. Jaden nodded slowly. Then tell me everything. And so she did. Not in fragments. Not in lies. But the full story. How Naomi worked herself to exhaustion. How she sacrificed food, comfort, dignity. How she chose a future she could not touch. How Harrison used silence and contracts to control what should have never been controlled. And how Jaden was never abandoned, but protected at the highest possible cost. When she finished, the room felt different. Lighter. And heavier at the same time. Jaden sat down slowly. I thought I was successful because of him, he said quietly. He looked at Harrison. But I am successful because she let me live. Naomi stepped forward, tears in her eyes. That was all I ever wanted. Jaden stood up and walked toward her slowly. For a moment, she didn't move. She was afraid. Not of him, but of what came next. He stopped in front of her. And for the first time since childhood, he said it. Mom. The word cracked through the room like light breaking through a storm. Naomi covered her mouth, tears spilling immediately. Jaden pulled her into his arms. Not gently. Not carefully. but fully, like someone who had finally found something lost for too long. Naomi held him tightly, shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Jaden closed his eyes. "No," he said softly. "I understand now." Across the room, Harrison watched silently. For the first time, he had no control over the outcome. No leverage. No power left to use. Only consequences. Evelyn walked to his side. "This is what truth looks like," she said quietly. Harrison didn't respond. Because he finally understood something too late. Some sacrifices cannot be erased. Some lies cannot protect forever. And some love returns even after it is buried. Naomi and Jaden left the mansion together that night. Not as strangers. Not as broken pieces. But as mother and son, trying to rebuild what time and silence had stolen. Behind them, the city continued to shine. But for them, the darkness had finally ended. Or at least the worst of it. Because healing, like truth, doesn't happen in a moment. It begins there. Slowly. Quietly. And painfully honest. And this time, they would face it together. Jaden stood frozen, his chest rising and falling too fast, his phone still shaking in his hand. "Answer me," he said again, louder this time. "Is she my mother?" Harrison Cole didn't move. For the first time in years, the man who controlled boardrooms, companies, and people's futures looked uncertain. Evelyn stepped forward slowly, her voice soft but steady. "Yes," she said. One word. But it hit harder than anything else. Jaden stumbled back slightly, like the floor had shifted beneath him. "No," he whispered. That's not possible." His eyes darted to Harrison. "Tell me she's lying." Harrison finally exhaled. And that silence was the answer. Jaden shook his head violently. "You told me she abandoned me. You told me she didn't want me. You built my entire life on that story." Harrison's jaw tightened. "She signed the papers." Jaden laughed once, but it was broken. "Papers?" he snapped. "You're talking about papers while I just found out my entire life is built on a lie." Evelyn stepped closer, her voice firm now. "She didn't abandon you," she said. "She gave you up so you could survive." That statement landed differently. He turned to her sharply. "Survive what?" Evelyn hesitated. Harrison spoke before she could. "Poverty, struggle, a life you don't understand." Jaden's voice cracked. "So you erased her?" No one answered. And that silence confirmed everything. Jaden backed away slowly, shaking his head like he could physically push the truth away. "I mocked her," he whispered. "I looked at her and I told her people like her don't belong." His breath hitched. "That was my mother." Evelyn's eyes softened. "Yes." The word broke something inside him. Jaden turned suddenly and stormed out. No guard stopped him this time. No one dared. Because the truth had already done more damage than any barrier could fix. Naomi sat inside her small room, staring at the legal papers scattered on the floor. Everything felt like it was closing in. Every word on the page reminded her of the same thing. Silence or destruction. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead. "I did what I had to do," she whispered. "I did what I had to do." But her voice didn't sound convinced anymore. Then, a knock. Not sharp like before. This one was different. Urgent. Familiar. Naomi froze. Slowly, she stood up and opened the door. And everything stopped. Jaden stood there, breathing hard, eyes red, face broken. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Naomi's lips parted slightly. "Jaden." That name hit him like a wave. He flinched, then stepped inside without waiting for permission. The door closed behind him. Silence. Heavy, Unbearable. Jaden looked at her properly now. Really looked. The way he hadn't before. The face he had dismissed. The eyes he had judged. And now, everything changed. His voice came out low. Why didn't you tell me? Naomi's throat tightened. I couldn't. That's not an answer. Her hands trembled. If I had come back, they would have taken everything from you. Your life, your education, your future. Everything I fought for. Jaden's eyes filled instantly. So you chose silence. I chose you. That line broke him. He looked away, breathing unevenly. You let me hate you. Naomi stepped forward slowly. I let you live. That moment stretched between them like a wound reopening. Jaden's voice dropped. I saw you last night. Naomi nodded slowly. Yes. And I didn't recognize you. I know. A long pause. Then Jaden whispered something that made her heart stop. I told them you didn't belong there. Naomi closed her eyes. Pain flickered across her face, but she didn't step back. I heard, she said softly. Jaden's voice cracked. I said it to my own mother. Silence again. But this time, it was different. Because something inside him was breaking open. Not anger. Not pride. But regret. Deep, heavy regret. I built my whole life believing you left me, he said. And now I find out you were the one who stayed. Naomi shook her head gently. I stayed in a different way. Jaden finally looked at her again. And what am I supposed to do with that? Naomi's voice softened. I don't know. That honesty hit him harder than anything else. Because for the first time, there was no script. No controlled story. No carefully shaped truth. Just reality. Raw. Unfinished. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. As if the world itself was reacting to what had just been revealed. Jaden stepped back slowly. I need time, he said quietly. Naomi nodded. I understand. He paused at the door. Then whispered, barely audible. I don't know how to hate you anymore. And then he left. Naomi stood still long after he was gone. Because she knew. This was not the end of the pain. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Forgiveness. Or destruction. And somewhere across the city, Harrison Cole had already started planning his next move. Because the truth was out now. And he was not ready to lose control of it.